What if the universe actually is a multi-dimensional spreadsheet? What if the universe rather can fit into a multi-dimensional spreadsheet of every single thing that exists? Let's just say there are these very tiny particles. Even though it looks rather much more like there are actually kind of waves going through the universe, gravity waves and other waves, magnetic waves, for example. Now, what is the idea here? The idea is that if there are these particles, or there are these waves, or there are these both at the same time, the only thing you now have to figure out how many dimensions there are. And then you can make an Excel spreadsheet, basically, that is very, very large, with all the single items that are in the universe. This means now, if we change these things, then the universe changes. But this also means that we can capture the entire universe at any given point in time. Of course, this spreadsheet maybe also needs to include a function of how all of these work over time. So basically all these particles maybe have some kind of movement, some kind of interaction. And if you want to predict what a snapshot of the universe looks like, this large database of all the particles in the universe, then you also need to predict this over time. But time, again, is just another dimension we need as in the spreadsheet. The first iteration of this is just a three-dimensional spreadsheet, actually. If you just think of the three dimensions we have in space, we have these three dimensions we actually live in. Then we have forwards, sidewards, and basically upwards. You can also, of course, take the other one and basically negate the directions, but this doesn't really matter. We have these three dimensions. And now, if we add time as another direction, also intertwined with gravity, we already have maybe 4 dimensions. And maybe these are all the dimensions we need. Maybe there are even more dimensions. Maybe according to string theory, or much rather the string hypothesis, there are many more dimensions. And what our universe actually looks like maybe depends on how many string dimensions there are. But this is maybe a chapter for another, first of all, research project, because I'm not that versed in these kind of physics theories. But now, here's the idea. If the whole universe can fit actually into a spreadsheet, then if you had access to the spreadsheet, then, I mean, just because you can analyze what things are doesn't necessarily mean you can then also create something like this. Just because you can list all the items that there are in a room, for example, and that's basically what we are doing. Instead of listing all the items, for example, you are owning, basically, we just list all the smaller particles you are owning as a subset. And the things you own are only a subset of the universe, basically. But if we take a look at the entire universe, and maybe also at the multiverse, which then, according to string theory, maybe exists, or according to the string hypothesis, maybe exists, then all of these things maybe fit into one single Excel spreadsheet. And the question arises, if we then have something like this, if there is something like an Excel spreadsheet, and if we then also can have functions, if we find out the functions at which, or the function we need to extrapolate, not necessarily extrapolate, but just predict over time what these particles are doing, then we basically can create a model of the entire universe. And the reason I am actually thinking about this is I lay awake yesterday night, and sometimes I just can't sleep, and especially in the last weeks I couldn't sleep. And then I have very nice thoughts, actually, my mind just seems to wander, and I also sometimes wonder why this is. But here's the basic train of thought I had. First of all, science is currently not really digital. Science is made by humans, and these humans then linearly output something that is a printed version. But this printed version is not smart in any way. The only smart thing about this is if you publish it online maybe, and you can link other studies. But what now if basically you had a gigantic knowledge base? Let's just say this is Wikipedia. And in Wikipedia, whenever somebody, for example, referred to an established fact, then there would be a link, just like references on Wikipedia, just smarter, to the actual real study, the real version of the study in the internet, basically. And this would be the original, similar to NFTs or how NFTs are structured. Maybe this would be a gigantic blockchain. It doesn't really matter. But now, currently, the internet is kind of, if you took a sheet of paper and you took the sheet of paper and gave it to someone, then this is very dumb because you cannot update the sheet of paper. It's a printout. And science currently, I think, is also kind of just a snapshot, a printout, but it is actually not smart. It is not developing over time. It is not linked in any major way. So if we had this Wikipedia page, for example, that is referring to what the universe actually exists of, wouldn't it be nice if the actual study, for example, lived in the internet? And if the study now lived in the internet, then everybody could very smartly link to this. But these links would not be, as currently the web is structured, unidirectional, meaning they point towards the study, but the study doesn't point back towards them, but actually bidirectional, meaning two directions. Then we would have a much smarter link. And so now if somebody created actually content, a study is basically also just content. It is just content that is proven to be smart, not smart, but that it is actually scientifically proven. The scientific method is basically just an attempt to make something like this, to make a system where all the knowledge we currently have accumulated is stored. And if we had access to this kind of system, similar to Wikipedia, but much, much bigger, maybe 100 times in terms of the impact, in terms of the scale, maybe even way more than 100 times of the scale of Wikipedia. Wikipedia is basically the current stage. Wikipedia is basically the first iteration, together with other sources in the internet, of combining all of the human knowledge digitally. And before Wikipedia, there was not a something everybody could access and everybody could write. So now, all the intelligences that currently live on this earth, and that actually also usually are humans, because we are the most advanced intelligences known to us, at least, then all these people could work much more together. All these minds could work much more together. Imagine a world where every time you say something, you could automatically link all of these things. Of course, we wouldn't then, maybe in the future, not say these things anymore, but we would just not, every time we speak, we are also just creating a printout. We cannot remember all the different things. And if you even remember something, it is also a unidirectional link. It is a unidirectional link that is also a copy, that is only a copy of the real thing that is stored in your brain and also distorted over time. So what if, whenever you actually said something, whenever you made a logical conclusion, whenever you linked two facts together, you could actually do this in a smart way by referencing all the different things, but not only referencing, but actually directly linking these things. Then just how much this would improve conversations. For example, there are debates online, and often in these debates, and also in presidential debates, nobody knows if the things the people are saying are even true. The people are just randomly stating things, and unless you constantly either fact-check the thing, or you have somebody who constantly researches it and then fact-checks it, but that's also only a printout of the knowledge. The interpretation, the thing is that currently, if there is something, a fact, that there is also the interpretation part, and this interpretation part is something we can get wrong at any point in time. But what if there was something that prevented the interpretation part from being wrong, because you could only move forward with the right things, with the right facts? And now, if you extrapolated this further, science is actually just a method of modeling the world around us, because we want to know what will happen. we have the past, and we can currently change the past. So the past writes itself here all the time. It basically stems, this is the present, and the present stems basically, if this is one slice of time, then at every point of time where this time passes, of course time is infinitely small actually, but if we assume a certain amount of time, then every time we stamp another sheet onto it, then we stamp another sheet of present onto the past. So now, if we do science, then we actually are trying to change the past by influencing it. This is also what we do by making decisions. We are trying to influence the past by actively trying to change the present, which then gets stamped into the past. And currently, we cannot really reverse the timeline. We can only slow it down and maybe slow it up or speed it up by maybe traveling close to light speed, and we can actually slow it down compared to other people or compared to other observers. So now the next idea is that if science only wants to create a model of the world that is ideally able to predict any given point of time in the future, then what this model ideally in some distant future actually looks like is this Excel spreadsheet. We would have to model the entire universe if we actually wanted to get every single detail right. Currently, when we are modeling things, then we are simplifying things. We are leaving out other factors, but these other factors might just add up to something that is also important. We are just concentrating on the things that basically bring us most of the benefit of the model. But of course the model is always to a certain extent just wrong because we need to leave out things. But what if we didn't leave out things? Then science over time would need to create this gigantic spreadsheet that included all the different particles of the universe, and then we would have a unified theory of the universe and of the maybe multiverse, which then would enable us to at any point in time predict any given point in time in the future. And this also simultaneously means that then we would have our entire timeline mapped out. If we can predict everything, can we then actually still change anything?